هجي انت اينا هنقبر زلو بروجرام تسرعينا مجمريات كابو تسامي كالي بحال كابرز بماليتيو كميت سريعنا زلنا منالون لابزي ماليت منال يونس كمون درزا اسمان بمجمريا دسلستيو قانقوا كنفتينا ماليتيو بروجرامنا نكفتينا كاون دحال انت يكون بانجلش راح يكون نحنا مدب مالتيو انت كتلونا يا تاخذ غزي نغبرا ناي حدا دقيقه نحلنا صلوت نتم سماعتنا نذكرينا مالتنا نخلوت كحلف.
طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. في البدايه نعتذر عن التاخير، تاخرنا تقريبا حوالي 20 دقيقه. حنحاول نضغط البرنامج عشان ننهي في التوقيت المطلوب. برنامجنا ان شاء الله حيكون عندنا 4 اوراق أو 4 متحدثين أساسيين. حيكون عندنا 4 متحدثين أساسيين. الحديث كله والحوار إن شاء الله حيكون هم حيتكلموا بالإنجليزي. الناس بعد ذاك حرة اللي عاوز يتكلم بالعربي أو بالتجريني حنحاول نساعد في الترجمة. برنامجنا اليوم حنكون معاكم دكتور تكابو، عبد الرازق من كانبرا، ومنال يونس من أدلايد. حنبدأ بدقيقة وقفة حداد على الشهداء، وبعد ذاك إن شاء الله حندخل في البرنامج.
Hello everybody and welcome. I'd like to take a moment to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land and to acknowledge elders past and present, and also the ongoing connection to this land. We've had a great day so far. The rest of this program is going to be in English, but before we do anything more, just as it was mentioned, this is Dr. Takabo. He's here from Brisbane, and we have Abdul Razak here from Canberra, and we have myself from Adelaide. Before we go any further, we're going to take a moment to pay our respects to the martyrs before us. We're going to have a minute of silence, and that will begin now. If we could all stand up, please. Thank you very much. To continue with the rest of the program, I would like to introduce Dr. Takabo. I've left my paper over there, but Dr. Takabo works at the University of Queensland, and actually got his PhD in Uppsala in Sweden, and he's here today to introduce the rest of the program for us.
طيب برنامجنا ان شاء الله حيبدا دكتور تكابو هو محاضر في جامعه كوينزلاند، وحيدي مقدمة عن طبيعة هذا النشاط وخلفيته والخطوات اللي أوصلتنا إلى هذه المحطة.
Okay, thank you guys. First of all, before I just want to give you a background, a little bit of introduction. But before I start that, I want to mention that the last, I think, 2 days before the election day, we know the Prime Minister of Australia, Bob Hawke, had passed away, and we know he was a great friend of Eritrea. Especially he launched the book Towards Asmara with Tom Kennedy. So we just want to pass our condolences to the family as well as to the Australian people. After that, I just want to give a little bit of introduction. We know everything, but it's good also to give a background. So we know everybody how we were jubilating, how we were happy during the 1991 celebration day. People were everywhere in the street, but we know also the 1993 referendum, which 99.8% of people voted yes, and we can see it there in the picture, as you see that people were in the queue to cast their vote. So we know how the people at that time, the emotion, all those interests of people to bring this country forward. But then it comes to 2019. I just jumped from there to 2019. Well, it is a time of Yaakil. It's different, a time of Yaakil. And how we are celebrating? We are celebrating demonstrations, conferences, maybe discussions all over the world. I just listed only few of those countries who are doing this, but we can list almost all over the world. We are saying Yaakil, and we are celebrating this day different way. We celebrating by saying Yaakil, we already done, and we celebrating also by giving the conference and also discussion for our country, how we will, I think, build our country in the future. So, having said that, I would like to just quickly mention why May 24 then, why we decide to do on May 24. Of course, as I have said, it is the day that the colonialism is get rid of colonialism, and then we become a sovereign country. So that is a day of joys and a day of happiness. But at the same time, it is, as you might see, we had dreams of the 30 war struggle. The dream was for what? It's for building a democratic country, a country which is justice. However, this has been betrayed. So we would like to voice at this day as well. So these are the two reasons, but we can have more reasons why we decide to do on this day. You probably see, I just put it here. This was the 2018 peace between Ethiopia and Eritrea. The people were happy. Always the Eritreans are celebrating for peace. We thought it is. Everybody thought that it's a peaceful and a lasting peace. However, it turns out to be different. Okay. So having said that, so our country is, as I have indicated here, it's betrayed because we see only one dictator doing this all things and probably few followers. So, having said that, we try to organize this event within a very short period of time. It was only 1 month we did. And how we, why, first of all, why we choose, I have already indicated, but how did we manage to do one month of, I mean, it's a big event, and we managed to do it within 1 month. It's just technology, not only technology without devotion, without determination is difficult. So the people who organized this, they were very determined. They say that there might be many obstacles, but we can do it, and we made it as well. So that's pretty much what I would really want to appreciate for the organizing committee. So our program is, as I have mentioned it before, from 11 to 1 p.m. we had this demonstration. This peaceful demonstration, saying we had said Yaakil, enough is enough, or Canbera. Okay. Then now is we start from 3 up to 5. We have this conference, and the conference we have got good speakers. Actually, even Dr. Berhan managed to come on time, so we are really happy on that. We are grateful for that. Now the next is between 6 or 6:30. The program is 6:30, but we can extend it, maybe if possible 6. We can put it. Going to be up to 8 o'clock. We're going to have discussions. So we'll see later on. I will let you know what those discussions are, what the agenda are. However, we're going to change the hall from here to the bigger one. Unfortunately, the time between 3 and 5 was already occupied. That's why we crowded here. However, later on we will move to the bigger hall. So apology for that. So having said that, only thing I would like to stress here is that in order to achieve our objective, we will have objectives. But to achieve our objectives, what do we need to do? We need to do, first of all, we need to have open-minded. Our mind should be open. We shouldn't have any bias. Who is coming here? Don't worry. So, because we are transparent, we're doing transparent things. So, and we will win. So, let's be open-minded. Let's be prepared for reconciliation. Let's be determined to achieve our objectives. So that means commitment is important. So we need to do these things in order to successfully achieve our objectives. Of course, we know our objective. What is our objective? Definitely, we want to throw the dictator. That's it, and we'll like to have a country which is a country of constitution, a country that will be ruled by law, and of course a country of justice. So that's what we're going to achieve. Okay, so now I will stop here, and I will pass the stage to Abdelrazak.
Thank you, Dr. Tikabo. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Tikabo, the hard work, the devotion. If not for Dr. Tikabo, this event wouldn't be as it is today. It's bigger than our expectation. It's higher than our expectations. That's why we are all crowded in this small hall. So maybe our expectation should be bigger and higher. As he mentioned, we have 4 speakers, and 2 males and 2 females. That's good. But we're gonna start with the males for respect. It's the age issues. It's not the gender issue. So our first speaker is Dr. Burhan. Dr. Burhan is a well-known Eritrean or Australian from Eritrean background. He's a lecturer and a senior researcher at Melbourne University. He was nominated for Australian of the Year for 2009, and he awarded Victorian of the Year for 2009. I was privileged to be with him here in Canbera that time. And he played a great role with African communities and Eritrean community as well. He was the head of Eritrean community in Melbourne for a long time. So he's a well-known. We'll introduce Dr. Burhan in the issue of reconciliation and its future in Eritrea. The floor is yours, Dr.
نخنصاني دس دبلني نمجمريا خبت خلينا يغزاوتنا وصينا حدا ستيب نقدميت كيدنا ازي دما ابتي زلو غعزو دس يبل بزي مخنيات نتوم زدالو نزي كمسغنو مفتو كابو غسيلي يغني لي ازي نعايز حبكم نعدل نخزارب كاباهم زياده فليتي يكونكن ግን ዘለና ሓሳብ ምሳኹም ካፈል ደስ እናበለኒ ካብቲ ኸዳልዎ ዝፀናሕኩ ካብ ዝተሓተትክዎ ብዛዕባ ሪኮንሲሊየሽን ግን ድማ ኣጋየሽ ይህልው ብዚ ብዛዕባ ናይ ጉዳይና ዘይፈልጡ ስለዚ ኣየናዩ ቅድሚት ኣንፅኤ ኣየናዩ ከፅንሕ ዝዓበየ ሕቶ ነይሩ ስለዚ ፍቐዱለይ ቁሩብ ባክግራውንድ ክህብ ምናልባት ኩልኩም ትፈልጥዎ ትኾኑ ግን ቶም ዘይፈልጡ ምሳና ኣብቲ ስጉምቲ ንኽኣትዉ ብዛዕባ እቲ ዘለዎ ኩነታት ኣቐድም ኣቢለ ቁሩብ ክገልፅ እየ ኣብ ቅድሚ reconciliation and peace ንዝብል ስለዚ distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land of which we are meeting, the Nwangwal people, and pay respect to their elders of the Nwangwal nation, both past and present. I have been fortunate enough to work with the indigenous people, the traditional owners of the land. People I respected their wisdom in the way they are, guided by elders. They are not so far apart from our own people. So there is similarity within our culture and the indigenous culture because they have respect to their elders and they work with their elders, which this is a sign that we need to celebrate. We are with people who have got similar cultures that are to be respected. Now, the theme of our meeting is unity in diversity, reconciliation and peace. And I like to remind everyone, including myself, that this meeting is hosted in a city that owns and promotes reconciliation and peace, and shares reconciliation and peace with other people, including us. Therefore, can we own and share reconciliation and peace with each other and with others? So my focus is, what are the steps to own reconciliation and peace? It is important to free ourselves from hate, vengeance, start to create forgiveness, which we can, and to be honest with you, as a Muslim, the first thing in Islam it says, forgiveness is al-musamih kareem, and the only time the only time a character of a human described in God's behavior is when you are forgiving, which means whoever forgives is merciful. So, and preparedness to compromise and accept and respect with humility. One thing that we carry with us in our baggage, which we got it back from home, is pride. This has to, we're living with egalitarian society. Australians are known as egalitarian society. They're very humble. Whether you are a professor, a prime minister, or a minister, you are part of the society. You are normal. And that is part of our crisis in our system, that we like to be, it's me. That culture has to change for a step to take in reconciliation. We need to know where we are from, where we are now, and also need to have a vision of where we want to go. That is essential if we are to plan for the future. Knowing where we're coming from, to where we are now, and to where we are going will help us to put our plans in accordance. There are actually good, in the past, the history, there are actually good practical reasons why we should look at the long history of our region. Historically, there have been stable cultures and governments in the region that have lasted for centuries. The reason this is important, if we look at the history, we can get an idea of what are the natural divisions of the region. The historical countries follow the natural division of geography and also give rise to regions of culture, language, and religion. If we are aware of what worked naturally in the past, this may help us to find solutions that respect the history of the region and that can be as long-lasting as those old countries. We can be absolutely certain of that. We are the cradle of humanity. One of the first in history to provide amnesty to asylum seekers from across the Red Sea, and have proven history on religious tolerance, which I like to say it in Tigrinya, that نحناتهم مجمريا حزبينا نب علم ني كابوجا هديمهم زبوتو سدتنياتا زعقوبنا هنا كلتي هايمانوت سلستيو نا يهود Islam and Christianity side by side كوينو نخنبرها بعلم استفتنا نباناي حجي نحنا مجرشة خنكون قبني Zellanayo, the present, we all know that the whole Horn of Africa region has, at the moment, very great problems economically. The whole region has been subject to droughts, famine, and floods caused by climate change and civil war, lack of leadership, abuse of human rights, and exacerbated by rising food prices with various causes, one of which is the diversion of food crops to biofuels. So these problems affect the whole region, the world, and they are going to get worse. Just to mention our neighboring country to Eritrea, if we pick Somalia and Sudan. Before looking at Eritrea and Ethiopia, let's just touch on Somalia and Sudan. At present, there is really no Somalia, and it is not even clear that there should be one. We have collections of different states. We need to try to get the most stable of those recognized and accepted by the developed countries. You heard about Somaliland and others having their own within the Somalia. Then Sudan. We have a government that was usually performing well until not so long ago, but then in response to internal development, it resorted to repression and to allow power to pass into the hands of civilians If not, that has had disastrous effect, which we've seen what happened in Khartoum. We should be very aware of that when we look at the situation in Eritrea and Ethiopia. When we look to Ethiopia, Ethiopia is probably the best performing of the countries in the region. It has attempted to preserve and extend amnesty, freedom, to engage with developing world in the positive way, and also to their own opposition, giving amnesty. That's historical in the recent history of our region. It has engaged in military conflict generally as the aggressor in Somalia. At present and for the foreseeable future, it seems that Ethiopia is acting as a source of stability despite the internal crisis. It could be perhaps even more so if it were not for the war in Somalia and the Ogaden region and severe financial problems, and it has endured the worst of droughts, unlike Sudan, is also having to cope with large number of refugees in the region, including Eritrean refugees. When we narrow the microscope and look to our country, Eritrea, Eritrea is rapidly deteriorating. A government formed from an army is basically continuing to run the whole country using the harsh methods needed to win a revolutionary war, which we started with. By what works for a war, fails for a country. The closer Eritrea gets to collapse, especially the closer gets Eritrea to collapse, the harsher the repression becomes. Lately it has become probably quite close to losing control. The infrastructure is collapsing, the army deserting, and it is doubtful whether the country even has the ability to defend itself. So, looking at the region as a whole, what we can learn, what we see is that it is occupied by a diversity of people. Trying to impose one very rigid rule doesn't work because immediately you get dissidents or opponents, which soon turns violent. Our youth are voting with their feet, leaving the country, perishing in the deserts and dying in the Mediterranean Sea, which is very sad. This is unique in our shame history that we allowed it to happen, and we all sit and saw this happen to our people and still happening. The success that has been gained during the 30 years of liberation has become a gain of more pain. So now let's consider the country where we were born, the Italian combination. There is some hope in there, and that's what I would like to bring, but it's not all doom and gloom. The Italians combined Eritrea and Ethiopia in the past, and the countries that had been separated and independent for thousands of years. After that, British success in the Second World War, that bring the two countries, which we are still paying the price for now, because of that legacy of the history. The Emperor Haile Selassie, who had been the Time magazine man of the year in 1935, that's for the Rastafarians especially. First freed the slaves, then made a federation with Eritrea in 1952, but in 1962, Haile dissolved that and annexed Eritrea. This led to the Eritrean War of National Independence, and in 1993, as was mentioned, Eritrea became a state standing on its feet. Under the rule of Isaias Afwerki, Eritrea became one of the three most unfree states in the world. The country has been referred as a giant prison. Afwerki knew that resistance mainly comes from young men. So he simply introduced all males and young women over the age of 18 into army. That was a designed plan to keep control of all the young instead of being out and about and making problems to his rule. The period of service is supposed to be 18 months, but actually as soon as one period is over, the next follows. And this goes for decades, and I'm sure you are more experienced on this story than myself, who you have got first-hand experience. I'm not there to tell you, but I'm there to share for the people that have not had the history in that sort of chronology. What they do is just surround a country dance to make them all under a drunken system, the culture that was introduced in the Sha'biya time, the drink and dance, where you live always in hallucination, where you don't ask questions, but you are shut by a culture of domination of dance. If you're not part of it, you are suspicious. These army draftists now work on military activity, but also projects such as road, dam building that are supposed to benefit the country, although they seldom do. Conditions within this guarded army camp are pitiful. They have to pay their own staff to go to their family, to pay for their family to live. And this is the crisis the country is facing. Health care is almost non-existent. Those who show enthusiasm are reduced into the inner core of oppressive military. The majority dream only to escape. If they succeed in crossing the border without being shot or seized and tortured, their destination is only slightly better condition in refugee camp in other countries. 1/5 of Eritreans has fled the country, 2 generations of young people. Their families suffer for it, and many to pay for their repatriation. And I'm sure we have many people here who already had some first-hand experience. Now, if we come from a diaspora point of view, those refugees who ran across the border far little better. Eritrea used to have 150 escapees per week. Now the number is above 600 per week. Some are in refugee camps in places like Ethiopia, Sudan, and Kenya, where the UNHCR does not have enough money. And this is where we abrogated our responsibility, because we left them at the mercy of others to be looked at. And the UNHCR now, given the international demand to feed the Eritrean refugee, is failing. Others act out of a precarious existence in cities like Addis Ababa, Sudan, Khartoum, Nairobi, and Cairo, where most of them are in vain of abuse. That can't find their way to Libya, pay every cent they have, save it for dangerous crossing to Europe. Others seek to cross the Sinai Desert to Israel. Particularly gruesome organs crudely harvested in mobile ambulances and units then are dumped in a hole. And who benefits from those organs? People we live with here in the Western world. And this is where we've been silent for this. We have not demonstrated to the world that these are blood of our own brothers. Recent changes. Just there has been an apparent change in the attitude of the Eritrean government to external relations. Eritrea was under UN sanction from 2009, an arms embargo, asset frozen, and travel ban, not due to the internal situation, but because Africa has been training and supporting the terrorists in Somalia. Our internal problem has not been the agenda of international community to take action on SIS, but because of their interest in other parts have taken. And this shows that we have done nothing to make him accountable to his crime. Now, recently, a peace treaty was signed between Eritrea and Ethiopia after decades of border skirmishes. 5 border crossings were opened, enabling people near the border to cross and buy food. Some humanitarian NGOs were allowed to operate in the country. From the outside, it may have appeared that Eritrea was becoming more open, and the world has been anxious to encourage this in order to help stabilize the region and improve human rights. This was an illusion. The SIS only desired to get food, medicine, and arms to stop his military elites from rebelling and to be able to travel for medical treatment. He also wanted Ethiopia, a landlocked country that uses ports in Djibouti, to be able to bring money in using Eritrean ports. Just 2 weeks ago, he closed the borders again, temporarily. You may recall SIS's temporary definition. When he took power in 1993, it was for temporary. Again, now he's talking about the same word, temporary. You may recall SIS's definition of what temporary means. You may also wonder why he should let people cross the border. When many of them would not return, the answer is that SIS wants to depopulate Eritrea, apart from the young men who live in conditions of practically like slaves. So I probably taking you too much in telling you what you already know, but please allow me, the people that are here with us don't know, also should know that this history is important in my opinion. I could be wrong, please allow me to take that. Let me also shed some light in hope. The fact is that at the age of 73, SIS is in quite severe ill health. His control is sleeping. Confidential sources within Eritrea indicate that he will probably be forced to step down within the few years, sooner than later. SIS is among the last of his generation still active in government. He is surrounded by younger people who can see that the path Eritrea has taken has been disastrous for the country. Although our community work is political, it is necessary for us to maintain sources within Eritrea. We need to have that link if our activities has to have any meaning. The most likely person or people to replace SIS as considerably more moderate, they believe that the democratic government can restore the health of the country. And this is the only hope we have within the system in Eritrea. We have many educated people that can support and sustain a system, but hopefully the ones inside that have the power to change this man will come to that destination. So in brief now, the Eritrean community in Australia in general. The Eritrean community in Australia has been fortunate in that we are one of the most organized African migrant communities in Australia. And in a proud sense as Eritrean, I travel to many states and I meet different dignitaries. And a time in Queensland last year, I met the police commissioner of Queensland, and he asked me where I am. And I said, I am from Eritrea. And he said, the most law-abiding citizens we have in Queensland are Eritreans. And I felt so proud. So please join me that we have a good history and give them. And many other states as well. I was in WA, I was in South Australia, and I heard similar things. Now, our vision for the future. What do we want? We want to see the region where there are a number of governments which correspond closely enough to natural division, that allow enough freedom so that they have stability. We need them to accept each other enough so that there can be an end to the bitter wars and disputes. The developed nations have indicated that they are prepared to accept responsibility for being the leading cause of the climate change. That is causing starvation in third world and particularly in our region. This will only happen if there are governments that are stable enough to support infrastructure development. Let's also get that clear. Rogue governments or dictators, there is no money and no support should be given. Responsible governments, money to restore should be and be supported by all of us. Now, how to create peace, reconcile. How can we achieve a lasting peace in Eritrea? Before we get into specifics, there are two general points that we need to make about peace. First, peace is a process. It's not like something that you go to a shop and you buy it. Peace is a process, not a state. Peace is a process, not a thing. We can think of peace as the thing that we can somehow grab or buy and then sleep. Peace is dynamic. It is a balance. It is something that requires continual rebalancing. And please keep this word balance constantly in mind. This is very important. Now, peace involves sharing and giving. The second thing is that peace always involves sharing and giving. In this case, what we are talking about specifically is giving and sharing power and respect diversity. If you don't give and share power and respect diversity, gender, religion or faith, freedom of speech, you name it, you can't have peace. It will never happen. Now, let's talk more specifically about how we need to achieve peace. National reconciliation and peace come from some level of democracy. Historically, there are two ways to make a reconciliation work or peaceful state. One way is to make the state so powerful that it enforces one way of life through the state. Nowadays, we can see that this won't work. First, modern states are too diverse, like Australia. They are proud of their multinationalism. We live it in multinationalism, we breathe and we live it. Most of us speak at least 2-3 languages. And that shows we didn't embrace multiculturalism, but we lived in it and we rejoice in it. So our multiculturalism is pure, but we destroyed it. Now, if I'm talking about countries developing bombs and guns, so in modern era, even a small group have the power. And this is the question of balance comes, because if you put any group in the peace process out, it's easy to destroy. With the current technology we have, anyone can affect the process. So inclusiveness is critical. Unless we create an inclusive process where everyone feels as part of that process, we are in danger of repeating the SIS system again. To create reconciliation environment and peace, we need states that are democratic. In other words, we need states that represent the people. If we look at history, we find that democracies don't make war on each other. Like Australia doesn't fight Europe, Europe doesn't fight to Australia or America or other, because they have got a system that rules and respects. So we have to have some level of democracy. It doesn't have to be a Western style democracy. We can have our own democracy. So there are two basic principles in democracy. I'm sorry if I've taken you so much. Please forgive me. There are states that use three-tier principles. Villages elect village heads, then villages head elect the parliament. There are a number of states that have tried this model, and it ends up being rejected. For example, in Nepal, it just doesn't work. For a democratic state to work, the representative have to be responsible directly to the grassroots people. Democracy is a balance of power between pressure groups. Once Churchill said when he was told that democracy was the people's, he said, unfortunately, it is the pressure group, the lobbying group on democracy. The people only vote, but the people who have a stake, they fight and they balance that to get their stakes in the game. The principle behind democracy was expressed most powerfully by Winston Churchill. Now, Churchill said that, on the contrary, the way democracy works is by sharing power between pressuring groups. This is political pragmatism. If we talk about sharing power that with all the people, it seems this is a type of idealism, and in practice it doesn't really work. What does work is sharing power with representatives of those people to choose. You look at who actually has the power. Then you make sure when you create the government that it reflects the actual state of affairs as far as power goes. The developed states have maintained democracies actually that no one group is powerful enough to run the state by itself. As you can see it in Canbera now, having different independent and minor parts affecting the process of power in the government. So power split between the government and the administration and the judiciary. And in practice also the media and other groups. Because nobody is able to govern by themselves, they are forced to cooperate to govern. So all the stakeholders have power in making that system work. First, in order to have reconcile and peace, we have to involve all the people. We want to be able to build peace unless all the people have at stake, unless they are all gain from it. If there are parties, individuals who are going to lose or not participate, they may create mayhem to the process. So we need to work towards empowering women. This is critical, and this is part of the culture that I would like to mention is culture of reconciliation and peace. This is where we need to reflect, this is where we need to reflect a culture of peace and reconciliation is important. In order to achieve peace, you have to have a process of working towards a culture of reconciliation and peace. You have to consciously plan for a culture of reconciliation and peace. What do I mean by culture of reconciliation and peace? The culture of reconciliation and peace is about accepting and respecting differences. All adults have the right to make their own decisions and control their own lives. We have to accept that people will choose to live their lives differently, and that they have a right to do so. Repressive government work by creating division, by disempowering groups. They are authoritarian and believe that they have the right to make decisions for others. So we need to consciously work for a change of war culture. Still that culture resent in us. One of the principal ways that we can change the culture is by empowering women and youth. And this is critical because if we see our leadership, only Isaias that we see, but we have got many small Isaias somewhere else. So we need to have women and young people participate. Without empowering this section of our society, we are doomed to fail. There are three things that are essential to empowering women. The first is raising the marriage age and allow women to be educated. Women will be disempowered if they are not educated, if they are forced to marriage at an early age. And this is partly in our culture. We have to look at it for the best of our future, because the manals of the world are still with us, and we have to have not only one manal, but many manals, because we have them. The second thing is raising the compulsory empowered, because the compulsory education age. This is the way we ensure that women are more empowered because they are more educated. And the third, by far the most important, is women, the means access of birth control. Having too many kids sometimes puts them out of the equation. So I'm not telling you as an angel, I'm part of you, but we need to wash our past and look to the future. Looking to the more closely now, sorry. So in concluding, what I'd like to say is, I want to say again that I think the present situation cannot continue much longer. A change is coming, and I think probably quite soon. Whether those changes produce real benefit or whether it just results in more disruption and harm is really very much up to the leaders and us to influence the journey. What happens will depend on how well we can plan and how we can build unity amongst ourselves. This is the moment of decision. This is really where we can plan a new nation and make it work. Very soon the world eyes will be on us. Let us be ready, reconcile, and peace. In my final words, I'd like to acknowledge the organizers of this conference today, Dr. Tukabo, Dr. Dawit, Salah, Abdrazak, and many dedicated individuals to make us come one step close to going to Eritrea. So I'd like to say thank you for listening and thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burhan, for touching on a very critical and timely issue. The issue of reconciliation. استنيت هجرة واستنيت المصالحة الوطنية الوفاق الوطني. And issues are supposed to be a top priority for our state institution. However, it was and it is ignored and sidelined intentionally by the government. It's a divide and rule. 20 years after independence, we shouldn't wait any longer. We should take the matter on our hand. We should start reconciliation in diaspora. We should start it here in Australia, and we should start it here in Canbera, and we should start it here today. Thanks, Dr. Burhan. Okay. شكرا دكتور برهان على المحاضرة القيمة عن الوفاق وعن المصالحة الوطنية. قضية مهمة جدا جدا اتناولها دكتور برهان. المفروض تكون هي الأولوية القصوى للحكومة أو بعد الاستقلال، إلا أن الحكومة تجاهلت هذا الموضوع عن عمد لأنها تعتمد سياسة فرق تسد. نحن الآن في المهجر، يجب أن لا ندع هذا الأمر يمر، يجب أن نأخذ الأمر بأيدينا، ويجب أن نبدأ مشروع المصالحة في المهجر. يجب أن نبدأه هنا في أستراليا، يجب أن نبدأه هنا في كامبرا، ويجب أن نبدأه هنا الآن. Our next speaker is Dr. Peter Jones. As you can see, he got his PhD from University of New England. He is Eritrean friend. He is a believer in Eritrean cause. He is an Eritrean fighter, basically. He crossed all the way. He crossed all Tasman Sea from Tasmania and then to Melbourne and then here to Canberra to be among us. We are honored to have him here. The floor is for Dr. Peter Jones.
Okay. As earlier speakers have indicated, it's our tradition in Australia to start our presentation with acknowledging the people whose land we meet on today, our respect for their elders past, present and future, and because we're meeting in Canberra, I'd just like to remind you of the origin of the word Canberra. It means a meeting place, although some people would argue about that. It was the meeting place for the people from the coast with the people from inland. So yes, we do meet on Aboriginal land, but it's appropriate that you're meeting today at a place called the Meeting Place. So welcome. And if you want to see what it was like when Canberra started, go and look at some of those early pictures with the sheep wandering around Parliament House. I thought I ought to start by introducing myself, because you might wonder why on earth I came all the way from Tasmania to talk to you here today. Yes, I got up at 4 o'clock. When I was a child in Bath in England, one of the things I was aware of was that Emperor Haile Selassie spent some of his exile during the Italian occupation in a big house near Bath. And before he left, he presented us with a pair of elephant tusks, which still sit in the town hall. When I was a child too, my parents welcomed many African students into our house. Mum used to call it the International Hotel. And it included Eritreans during the early period of the British military administration and then the period between 1952 and 62. And I remember getting some of those stamps early on, British stamps overstamped with Eritrea. And I remember looking it up, because that's one of the joys of stamp collecting, which seems to have disappeared now with email. Later on, my parents moved to Malawi, and I went overland through Africa, from Egypt to South Africa and back, to learn much more about the African continent at first hand. And I was in Addis Ababa in 1974 when the emperor was overthrown, except I didn't realise what was going on at the time. Later, when I came back, I decided to visit Eritrea, and I caught the bus from Addis Ababa to Asmara, 3 days, up and down, and through the war zone. And people on the bus pointed to things by the road and said there was an attack here, there was an attack here, look at the damage. And when I got to Asmara, we were all put under curfew. And then I was going across to Sudan, and they said, no, the road's closed. So after the curfew was lifted, we had to fly to Kassala. That's another story. Then later on in my life, when I came here, I worked in Canberra. Today brought back many memories. I was in the old Parliament House working as a research officer for one of the independent senators. And a group of young Eritreans came to visit us. They wanted to set up the Eritrean Relief Association. And they met in our office because we were independent. And we had a committee, cross-party, Labour, Liberal and Independent. And it included support from Fred Hollows, who I met, from Thomas Keneally, and I still have a copy of that book, Towards Asmara, and many others. And so we set up, this was at the time of the famine, 1988, 89, 90, 91. And then finally Eritrea came into my life again when I moved to Hobart. And I now have an adopted Eritrean daughter. In fact, she dobbed me in for this. And I also work in the Migrant Resource Centre in Hobart. I'll talk a bit about that later, with Eritrean refugees. So I just wanted to make 5 points about Eritrea and Australia. It's important to remember that Eritreans are part of a wave of asylum seekers across the planet. The last estimate of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees was 64 million, the highest in the world. And one of the disappointments about being in Australia at the moment is that we've turned our back on responding to this wave of people seeking a better life, seeking to escape from tyranny, and Article 14 of the Declaration of Human Rights, that everyone has the right to seek asylum. This government is flouting international law, and it's why I wear a badge that says seeking asylum is legal. So what we have to do as the first thing is we have to develop a more humanitarian approach in Australia to the wider problem of refugees and asylum seekers. I was very sad, more than sad, on Saturday night, because I knew one of the things that would happen was that those asylum seekers on Manus and Nauru, in the detention centres in Australia, my friends who are here on temporary protection visas, nothing is going to improve. We've already had 9 attempted suicides on Manus and Nauru because of the hopelessness in the face of the election of the coalition government. So I'm not pretending to be partisan, I'm not. We have to work for the right of Eritreans, and we had speakers earlier today who talked about the wave of Eritreans losing their lives across the desert, losing their lives in the Mediterranean, and then those who have made it and are in this desperate search for a better life. So we have that responsibility, not only to Eritreans, and particularly those Eritreans rotting in the jails of Libya, but all those people seeking a better life, and especially those of you who've come to Australia or are trying to get people here. And it's not just Australia. Sadly, this wave of, we call it the identity crisis. It's affecting Italy, where a lot of Eritreans are going because of its past, where you've got an appalling government as well that is turning its back on refugees and Italy's past. So the second point I want to make, support for the refugees already here. I work with, now I've retired from teaching, technology got the better of me. I work with the Migrant Resource Centre in Hobart. And we work with refugees and asylum seekers. All sorts of different levels. I'm working with teenagers struggling to adapt to our education system. And we've talked about the importance of education. I'm teaching a young Eritrean woman how to drive. It's pretty scary. I taught her how to ride a bike. And she's learning to swim. But so many of the Eritrean community in Hobart, where I live, can't even speak English. So that's another level where we can respond immediately to some of the families who are here, particularly the single mothers coping without a husband and with 2 or 3 children. We have citizenship classes, which includes Eritreans, teaching them what it is to be a citizen in Australia and trying to be impartial. It's a bit difficult. Getting them ready for the citizenship test. We have conversation classes. So those are all the sorts of things and many other programs we're working with the Eritrean and the wider community in Hobart. And we've also talked, and I know it's the same in other cities, but we've also talked about the work of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which Australia should be contributing far more towards. We are one of the richest countries in the world, and we are an international disgrace as we slash and slash and slash our overseas aid budget. Instead, we prefer to spend it on the military. So there are a number of different levels where we can help the refugees who are already here. The third thing I want to mention is the issue of the trade, the weapons of destruction, the trade in death, the arms trade. You're well aware of the fact that the regime in Eritrea, which dodges and jumps and moves around in terms of its alliances, has been making friends with Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, caught up in the horror of the war in Yemen. And part of that is to do with arms sales. And I don't need to dwell on what's going on in Yemen, where 2/3 of the country live in a state of near starvation, cholera epidemics, where schools and hospitals are bombed by the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates. And who is arming them? And yet we have a government that last year announced in Australia that our aim was to join the world's 10 largest arms exporters. And part of our custom that we wanted was in the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So while we focus on the arms trade, not only in the Red Sea and the unholy alliance between the regime in Asmara and Yemen and the UAE and Saudi Arabia, we also have to look at Australia's responsibility, which instead of funding the UN High Commission for Refugees, instead is subsidising arms exports into the Gulf War, into the Yemen war, which also, of course, involves the regime in Asmara. And of course, next door to Eritrea is Djibouti, where you've got a similar sort of game going on, and a small country says, all right, let's have the Americans here and the Chinese. What a disaster. And both playing those dangerous games in that volatile part of the world. So again, we have to see the problem of weapons imports to support up the regime in Asmara in the wider context of the war in the Red Sea, in the Gulf, and the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which is at the bottom of it, and where Yemen is just a proxy war with Eritrea joining in as best it can for its own benefit. Fourthly, the whole question of Australia's aid budget. When I was here working with the Eritrea Relief Agency 30 years ago, the government, and we saw a picture of Bob Hawke, supported and sent aid to the Eritrean Relief Agency to combat the famine. Today, our government has slashed and slashed and slashed the aid budget. We were supposed to reach 0.7% of the GNP. It's down to half of that. It's about the most disgraceful of the OECD countries, and every year they cut it. And in particular, they cut it to Africa. They really don't care. And so we've got a reversal of a situation we had 30 years ago when Africa did count. And I believe that we turn our backs on Africa, not just the Horn of Africa, but Africa in general, because Africa is going to take a very important role in the next 50 or 100 years. Burgeoning population, economic development, and that, of course, will include the Horn of Africa, and other speakers have touched on it. So one problem we face here is trying to persuade the government not only to increase the overseas development budget, instead of spending it on the military, real security for real people who need it now, not mythical enemies, but also the whole problem of trying to educate Australians about Africa. And that's my last but one point. When I've got an adopted Eritrean daughter, I mentioned to you. She adopted me, I should say. I remember when I met her, she said to me, "You're the first person I've ever met who knows where Eritrea is. And you've been there." And I gave her a map of Africa. with all the countries marked on it, including Eritrea. She carried it round with her, and every time she met someone who said, "Where the heck's Eritrea?" she produced this map. And I think that's something really important that you can do as a community here, particularly if you have outreach to the Muslim community, the Christian community, to schools and universities, to educate Australians, not just about Eritrea, but about Africa in general. Show them where Eritrea is. Talk about your history. One of the things I've tried to do in Hobart is write about Eritrea. I had a big article about it in the paper. The headline was, well, where is Eritrea? Because I swear that 99 out of 100 Australians have never heard of it. Probably more than that. So that's something that we can all do by outreach into the community, telling them where Eritrea is. Get yourself a map, stick it in your wallet, stick it in your pocket, pull it out and show them where it is, and tell them about your history and where it is and what's happening there. And lastly, and I don't have the right to talk in any detail about this, planning for the future of Eritrea. One of the bywords of Mahatma Gandhi was that if you're going to fight for something, you have to have what he called the constructive alternative. Yes, you're all united to bring down that regime. Unfortunately, in a way, the president is 73, he is immortal, that's the problem of all dictators. But what's the future of Eritrea going to look like? I remember in the 1980s how we used to look to Eritrea for the underground society they created. The hospitals underground, the schools underground, the equality of men and women, advanced agricultural programs. People sitting around at night reading Charles Dickens and other authors. Education, as our speakers today have said, is really crucial. So what's your future Eritrea going to look like? Only you can decide that. You're going to talk about it. I can't tell you. What I do remember is the impression that an underground society in the late 80s made on us here in Australia. What was going on in that war of resistance and how that alternative society was being created. So the dreams are there. You've got people here tonight who lived through that. And perhaps if we can share that with each other, you'll have some idea of what a future Eritrea can and will look like. Never give up.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Peter. That was really outstanding speech. And most importantly, is with a very short period of time, we asked him to, if he can participate in our event, and he was accepted, and he did that. And even more, we asked him even if he can participate in the also demonstration, and he changed the flight. Of course, as he said, he has to get up 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the airport. So his dedication is great, and please let's put our hands together. Okay, so now we have to move on again to the next speaker. The next speaker is Saba Abraham. Saba Abraham is from Brisbane. As you can see, the CV I just made it very short. She's, of course, Australian of Eritrean origin, and she lives in Brisbane. Saba received a prize, and that is a Pride of Australia medal in 2009. Of course, Saba was very dedicated, especially to women and bringing women into a level that men can be. And she has, of course, established the one known as the Mo'uz. So women who've been at home need to go out and at least know the Australian way of life, and then probably make themselves as well known to the society. So her contribution was great, and now she's going to talk also on, I think, women in politics, but maybe the title could be changed, but that's where I put. So let's welcome Saba to this.
مجمريا دكتور برهان join كجبردلي أبتي to pay my respect for the traditional owner of this land, which is we are gathered past and present and future. لو معلتي معلتنا صنت يوخن كلنا نفلتو أما معلت من الناس نتينا كلنا مالت كم تخلوه توصل أنا هي نمجر مريا زي كم إيرتراويان بفلاي كأدلي تفتحي كابز تفعل على كورناتنا أستراليا ترخيبنا بزعبها هاجرنا تخبر واجز خفلنا لنا هاجرنا كنزارا ربن نتوم دمص زي بقولهم كأدمص خنا سمع أبز مركبنا بزخبر معلت زي سمعني حجس وسنية بقولون إذا معلت زي نقولنا إذا معلت زي نقولنا نناتو سمعت الله حدا هم تخزق الصنحة نحنا بتوم بلوزات يحواتنا سدرانا بوصتنا شل عدميهم عمبابا عدميهم كفيلهم نناس النت كبصحون هاجرهم زخفلوا مصانت أزيو خبر سمعنا خلو بتحدش نخكأ زخبور مسواتنا زتخفلو بلست هاجرنا حلوتنا لومي دحري زخل واجا ودسوق كفاء أبقى كتحل من إسي إرترا إتي سوق من الوقت أفتوان تزنورنا إن ذكره نحنا بجح حلفنا إرترا ولادنا إرترا كلنا جرادينا جن نزومنا جوسي بلو أنا كل جزء اسمه ذكره قد ما ميرام وزاي مالتي تقدر تخلونا خلو نأخذكم كإرترا برهان كتكوني هبلو نيرو نعي أمن أسعد ما يبقى سخ كأتو كابت زدف أنا زنبرخة إذا بلس حجر ناس حجر سلام كلنا جرزر لواك تلوني أزبل تسفى سلزنا برني إذا تسفى زخ أزي الصوم هبونيرو لومي من إسياتنا عدوم ناس أمس وزت ببتاتهم بديتاتهم بهزبهم أب بحر خط أحلو كاب هاجر كوزو كاب تأزي زي واحد زي دك سنجري إذا خا كم تخلنا النفلتو نحنا اتبعدي اتجزائي وشفتاري هبلو بزي حقس لازم رحسي من قستي يختبلون شجاري بزخونا جن نسو نحجر بعلامة نهزبي بعلامة خطفو كله نحناون تحتتو مهنا كنرسي عبلنا السان تفليتنا راح كعينا إزلوم حزنا يزلنا كله خنبك بحدث أنا حين كل جزيء أبزربانا نبلو نقدمي تندفع السخات هايو بحدنت زي حسوم كان مراحي نهاي مانت أجدفه نقول أجدفه نسبيت أجدفه نأرجيت أجدفه ندسوا أجدفه زقول فونا جرابي إسرائيل من هالبات زي تفلت زي تنجرة بزح كله خيلي أب إرتراجن زي تجبرج كان الله إننا كن أمن يبن سلازي نحنا كلنا أسلامنا كستاننا كاب طرف دنكل كساب طرف باركا بربعتي أكرنا عتنا إرترا بحدنت نزز سأنا يو بمعرض قفعنا كنقالسو دلوات كنكون ألنا الساعة أتا مفتحيتا كافتي دكتور برهان زقول صوزنا باري نحنا بحدنت مسن نسرح تراي نحنا حدقات مسن نقبر تراحيو بعالكو استغم زنديونا من تنيرو ستيل مسعوتنا يسرعتنا هنكو كنقبر على لنا انتاي إني إرتراز تقما نتي إرترا زتقما خان نوس وكفنا سابا زي جبرت كستو زي جبرة دي كونس سابا تايك جبرالني أبزي انت نوس وكفنا أقلبنا ندخل بس حدا لنا بس إحنا خيلنا thank you sorry ناب تعيش مخيلة so my presentation today is Eritrea women in politics. Of course, the subtopic I had is traditional role in society, struggle for independence, post-independence, which is Eritrean women's role. Women in tradition. Eritrean women have always confirmed to rigid, traditional, and conservative patriarchal society norm. Women have always had, continue to be, the caretaker of the family and domestic tasks, irrespectively of her tribe, and any Eritrean woman families has always been her priority. As a wife, mother, daughter, sister, aunt, grandmom, women were responsible for nurturing and taking care of each family members. Household duty, food preparation, cooking, serving, storage, collecting water and wood, washing and cleaning, gone. Tasks expected outwards into the farm, assisting with weeding, cleaning the land, harvesting and storing crops and mining animals. Women were key mediator of family conflict. Always, even though women never been given in law or publicly to be a leader, to be a breadwinner in our traditional society, but you know what's women's role. Almost, I would say, women is not practically even limited to their role as a tradition. While they have a baby in their, as a pregnant, they hold a baby in their back. At the same time, they do the work. They work to feed their family. At the same time, they want, whether it's the farm or a shop they have, to help their husbands, brother or sister. Mothers were the people tasked with keeping traditions and ensuring their children would pass it on. Also, women takes a big responsibility in passing the norm and tradition for their kids. The education and travel of women was restricted from any early age. Focus was put on domestically training girls from a young age. Girls was subject to genital mutilation, arranged and forced marriages from a young and a child pregnancy. Dr. Brhan, thank you for Nehru, or Dr. Brhan tried to speak about it, which is in our tradition, despite we have a lot of good tradition, but we have a lot of, as well, a tradition we need to stand against it. For example, female genital mutilation is the mkhishab knowledge. Abu gudat allo nugwal anesteti. Kale nugwal anesteti amnuus idmi'a kitmur'u magbar. Buzuh sa'binat hallo. Hade እኩል ትምህርቲ ወሲዳ ኣብ ሃገራ ከም ጓል ሃገር ኣብቲ ኩሉ ማዕዝናት ናይ ሃገር ዘድሊ ከተፍሪ ከም እትኽእላ ይገብራን ስለዘይ ትመሃር ዘላ ማለት እዩ ካልኣይ ከዓ ንኡስ ዕድሜኣ ትመርዖ ስለ ዘላ እውን ክትወልድን ኣብ ንኡስ ዕድመ ትወልድ ስለ ዘላ እውን ካልእ ናቱ ሳዕቤናት እውን ኣለዎ ማለት እዩ Independence and freedom was not extended to females. Women were never allowed to be seen making decisions in official capacity or hold public leadership roles. The role and contribution made by women, no matter how critical, have never been recognized as equal to men and never acknowledged accordingly. Human rights abuse for women, rape, shame lies with the victim and her family, most commonly forcing the virgin child young woman to marry her offender or be shamed. Domestic violence commonly accepted and normalized. Women see as property of their husbands. Child marriage. 41% of women aged 20 to 24 years were first married before the age of 18. Female genital mutilation, 81% of girls and women aged 15 to 49 years who have undergone FGM. The lack of legal or emotional support leaves those women stuck. A society to accept such abuse as a part of life and a system that does not provide the necessary service to support women who can forward are the key obstructions in changing this outlook on abuse. The inability for women to find the necessary support from their families or legal frameworks often leads to many of them fleeing the country. However, unfortunately, many still encounter sexual assault and violence from traffickers and employers. Struggle, Eritrean women for struggle or independence. Eritrean women were fundamentally instrumental in the Eritrean independence war for 30 years. They comprise of 30% of ELF and EPLF, Eritrean Liberation Front, and Eritrean People Liberation Front outline force, stood strongly in the face of adversity, pain, suffering, and bitter struggle for freedom, equality, and prosperity. Made extraordinary sacrifice and contribution characterized by optimism, heroism, patience, courage, determination, dignity, solidarity, and confidence. Participant in all areas of activities previously dominated by men, political, military, financial, education, and administratively in the force. Women fought for themselves as much as they were fighting for their country. They fought for independence, equality, social justice, and emancipation. Their role militarily, logistically, and medical were indispensable, both in the urban and rural area of the country. The support they provide in those areas, as well as in education, feeding, and providing sanctuary for fighters and civilians. Working in occupied areas, smuggling food, which many paid for with their lives. Despite their contribution, still held little leadership role in political life. The pre-assumption independence through the eyes of the Eritrean woman. Expectation. What do we expectation after independence? A prosperous and united Eritrean society, a democratic and advanced, well-structured government, equal rights, socially, economically, legal, and in terms of educational rights, the same opportunities given to men to be given to women, the ability to achieve success outside of the house and be recognized for it. The reality, what we define reality. Compulsory national service, pre-chosen career and education path, the continuance of male-dominant leadership role. Although women make up a large number of the workforce, they still have their pressure of providing the traditional domestic roles and marriages, continue the cycle and limited education opportunity, immigrating to other countries like Saudi Arabia, Sudan, etc. to become housemaid to support their families, extended and immediate. Women who came back from war had been revolutionized. They saw the importance and impactful work women can do achieve. However, the Eritrean way of life had not advanced with them. The conventional roles of women were still heavily practiced by civilian females who lacked the education and life experience outside of domestic life toward a different way of life. Suffered gender inequality across all sectors of society, education, pay, and opportunity. The regime's policy to systematically and brutally oppress the Eritrean people and women. Failure to legal ensure women's rights and implement socio-political and economical and politics. Demobilizing women found themselves comforted by the expectation. So what I would like to say to make it short is after the independence, they even, let alone the general woman, even those women, they had a historical participation in our independence. They've been thrown in the street. They've been thrown in the street, even they couldn't get proper work, proper money to raise the kids. Probably a lot of them, even those kids, their fathers sacrificed their life in the war. So the expectation and the reality becomes against each other. Despite all disappointment, despite all the hardship Eritrean women face, we are continuing to struggle. We are continuing to fight at this stage, even though women, they play a big role in our struggle in the time of freedom. Of course, they've been misused by the regime until now, and hopefully at this stage, all the women, they will stand against this regime and they will fight for justice and democracy. So before I conclude my speech, what I would like to see is what kinds of Eritrea do we want us to see as Eritrean women? A country, power to the people. A country, respect, a gender and equal right. A country, democratic constitution status, have rule of law. A free media and a free press. A government that respect and value the individuals of its nation, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, and class. A country have the opportunity, education, and economy for all. The country genuinely reconcile peace, truth, and prosperity for all. Thank you very much.
She has done very good, yes, thank you. And Saba is a fighter, and that's what we should be as well. Now, the time, as you see, it's 5 o'clock. So what we do is we have to find a solution, and that is, instead of continue, we break here. And so our Muslim brothers and sisters, they are going to break fast. So from 5 to 6, then from 6 to 6:30, Manal, the young chap which we expect a lot from here, going to give us a speech on the use, on empowering to the society, and also to how the youth secure the sovereignty of the country. So we stop here, and then the next meeting will be not here, but we have got a hall over the other side, so we're going to gather there. But for now, do you have anything to say, Kidon?
Yeah, so still dinner be served soon. Hello. So just to let you know that you just relax yourself, and then dinner will be served soon. So what we'll do is the caterer will set all the food in that room, and we'll just speak our dishes. Yeah. So you can sit here or there. So yeah. Anyway, dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, for those who are fasting, مجهزين فطور في الغرفتين اللي موجودات. تمر وشوربه والاشياء هذه، بعد ذاك الناس will have it. حرك
Come on guys. ما حنشيل بعدين هنا ما في مشكلة.
أبعتنا تعيسنا ينزلنا نزارة ألو أبزي نعو فاسيليتيت كبروا مجيبهم زلوا نساتهم نوت كوستيو دحراي نعند أميهم تحضرنا دحراي نعرفنا يومنا وليتنا كلنا نتاج تسامعنا بتن تسامعنا ينقع أصدقنا نخيل مالتي بس يا خمسة جينا نخيل نخيلنا بتن مجيبهم زلوا نتبتع سلازي نساء دحرايا نهجين إسراء ده نمنال كنباينا مالتيو بزعبا ناي قدنا من الساعة نهزبي نمحيا زلون قدر انتايو كمون هاجر نمروح حس زلون قدر ناي من الساعة انتاي الزبل كتقرب لنا مالتيا قيمي ناوهاجر مجمريا عبد الرزاق حفظه.
طيب السؤال دائما كان يشغلنا في اللجنه التحضيريه للعمل هذا، وايضا الناس اللي شاركوا بعد هذا اللقاء ايش نقدر نعمل؟ هل اللقاء هذا ينتهي على هذا الشكل؟ احنا كاريتريين في استراليا ايش نقدر نقدم للنضال لمسيره الديمقراطيه والسلام في اريتريا؟ ماذا نستطيع ان نقدم للاسرى والمعتقلين؟ ماذا نستطيع ان نقدم للاجئين؟ كل هذه الاسئله تحتاج مننا الى اجابات من خلال ننظم نفسنا في شكل من الاشكال. الاطار اللي حنطرحه هو حنقسم الناس الى حلقات نقاش صغيره، والناس نحن حطينا بعض الاسئله، الناس تناقش هذه الاسئله تحاول تصل فيها الى توافق حول الاجابات المحدده. بعد ذلك حناخذ اجابات كل المجموعات ونحاول نصيغها في ما اتفقنا عليه. هذا تقريبا حيكون مسار النقاش. لكن قبل ما ندخل في تقسيم الناس الى حلقات نقاشيه، منال يونس ان شاء الله عندها 20 دقيقه حتقدم ورقه، فتفضل.
If I was president of Eritrea, I would prioritize the pleas of my people. I would break down prison doors and build universities. We would have libraries to document our histories and news stories, laws to ensure our liberty, systems to sustain prosperity and investments in land and legacy. If I was president, our children would have childhoods. Our tribes would teach their truths. I would dismantle this restricting idea of identity because our cultures are so many, our languages plenty. I would ensure all our faiths can coexist. Listen to my people when they resist and stand with them when they raise their fists. If I was president, I would recreate, reunite, and no Eritrean would be forced to be alone, because if I was president of Eritrea, I would welcome all my people home. Hello everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm going to come back to talk a little bit about that poem later on, but before I start, I'd just like to let you know that I'm not trying to be the president of Eritrea. That's part of a campaign, and I'll talk more about that later. As it was mentioned, for those of you who don't know, my name is Manal Yunus, and I live in Adelaide. I came here with the Adelaide team. And I'm an Eritrean who moved to Australia 21 years ago. My family moved here when I was only 3 years old. And my dad raised me as very Eritrean. Even though I've spent most of my life here, and I did forget a lot of the language because of the fact that I was going to school in an area that wasn't very diverse. Our community in Adelaide was very small when I was younger, and there weren't many other kids to be speaking to that were Eritrean. And it was much later in my life that I made the choice to learn the language and to focus my native language, which is Tigrinya. But when I was growing up, I always knew who I was. I was always taught about our history. We would always go through family photos and I'd be told, this person, this is your uncle, he was a fighter. This one, this is your auntie, she died in the war. This one, they're imprisoned and we're still waiting for them to come home. I grew up with these stories. I grew up knowing that my dad was 14 years old when he left Eritrea. And it was during the time of the original struggle for liberation. And in that time he left because there were so many of my family members already affected that were killed, whether it was because of the Ethiopian regime before or because of the war that had already begun, the struggle that had begun. And so he left to support the family. At 14 years old, he left so that he could find work and share and give back to the family and support the people back home. And that story is not unique. I know that most of us here, if it wasn't you yourselves, you know family members who've done the same thing. But the people from where we're from, they're forced to grow up quickly. Young people are making adult decisions or have been making adult decisions for so many generations now. Our youth have been forced to grow up. I grew up believing that there was a home waiting for me. And that's one of the things that empowered me and that made me strong. Because living in Australia, there's a lot of racism that I have experienced, that many of us probably have experienced. And when you're going to school and you're wondering who you are, and people are making fun of you, whether it's because of your religion or your race, or because of your background, or because you're a refugee, you have to find something that makes you strong. And for me, that was learning about my history and knowing that no matter what people say, It is this that makes me who I am. It is this whole background that I have that makes me a whole person. And therefore, their words can't hurt me. And it was through that connection with Eritrea that I found strength. And so I believed that there was a home waiting for me. And that's what started. And that's why it was when I was a teenager that I started to really pay attention to what was happening back home. So it was at this time when I was a teenager that I really started to focus on learning Tigrinya again, trying to connect with family and with people overseas. And most of my travels so far, I've been lucky enough to go to different parts of the world. And they've mainly been to meet family members and to learn from them, to connect with community members that are in different parts of the world. And everywhere that I've traveled, I have found a welcoming community. People that are happy to know that there are Eritreans on the other side of the world who are also thinking about them and have the same ideas and want to know about back home. And the thing that broke my heart particularly in the past 2 years of travel, where one of the times I went to Europe. And I was so excited when I was in Switzerland because everywhere I went there was Eritreans, right? I didn't have to speak English, I didn't have to speak German or French or whatever because there was an Eritrean on every corner. So I just spoke to them in Tigrinya. They helped me find directions, I had coffee with strangers, but there were some times where I'd encounter somebody who when I asked them how old they were, they'd tell me they're 19. They'd tell me that none of their family is with them. They tell me, when I ask them what languages they speak, they'll say, yeah, Tigrinya, Arabic, because I was in this country, French, because I was there first, Italian, because I was there. And when I really thought about what that meant, that this 19-year-old that I was speaking to had spent the past 3 years of their life in these different countries, that they'd come through Italy, I realized the journey that they had taken was that one that we always hear about. The dangerous journeys going through Libya, the journeys going through Egypt. And that's what our people are going through. And it's impossible for us to ignore that now. The same thing happens when I go to places like Cairo, Addis Ababa. They're giant waiting rooms of people, of our people. And they come from all ages. But when we think about the people who are running from the country and why they're running, particularly now, majority of the time it's youth, running from national service. And the thing is, when we talk about youth, we can't just think about youth now, right? Just like I spoke about my father, he was young when he was gaining this responsibility, when he was leaving. So everybody here was a young member of the community at one point, right? So when we talk about youth, we're talking about all of us. Maybe it's youth that are encountering it now, but every generation has their time. And therefore, we all need to relate to that, and we all need to support each other. Now, especially due to the national service, as it's been identified as one of the key reasons that people leave Eritrea, especially young people. The United Nations, according to the UN report in 2016, said that it was up to 4,000 people leaving every month. We know when we hear these stories, whether it's about the Calais jungle, these stories that make international news headlines and they're talking about refugees. When we hear about a boat that sinks in the Mediterranean, we know that that's our people. We feel it in our gut, right? We know that that might be somebody that we know or that knows somebody that we know. We know that when we hear about trafficking in the Sinai. We know when we hear about Israel and its treatment of refugees, we know they're talking about our people. And the thing is that this regime that everybody's running away from, it has no mercy for you. It has no mercy for the fact that someone might be young and maybe they're innocent, maybe they don't even know what they've done wrong, or maybe they haven't done anything wrong. It doesn't have any regard for that. I'm going to tell you about a couple of young people that you've probably heard of. One of them is Abdul Wahab Jimmy. Who's heard of Abdul Wahab Jimmy? Okay, a couple of people. So he was a young man, and now he would no longer be considered young. But in 1992, his father was amongst one of the first mass arrests of Eritreans under this Higdif regime. In that time, there was up to 1,500 people who were arrested. The reason is not known why, though there are many ideas about who was targeted. But it was civilians, it was teachers, it was people who were active in the community, it was people who were influential in the community. So among them was his father, Ibrahim Jimmy. And after he left, Abdul Wahab was the oldest person, or the oldest boy in his family, the oldest male member. And therefore he started playing the male role, the father's role. And in 1994, there are variations about exactly what he said, but somebody asked him, how's life? And he said it was bad, because obviously he's struggling. Recently, shortly after that, he was also imprisoned. They came to his door at night, like how we hear many times. And so now, it's said that that person who he had spoken to, he gave an unsatisfactory answer to someone who might have been a spy, and he was imprisoned. And we know that that's how volatile the situation is in Eritrea, that people are afraid to speak, people are afraid to say anything. As it was mentioned earlier by one of our speakers, that's one of the techniques that this regime uses to silence people, right? Is to get them into national service, to make them afraid, and especially for youth. As we know, most revolutions are started with young people because of the vigor that young people have, the ability to break rules, the desire to rebel. These things where you see injustice and you don't take it. That's why our revolutions in the past were also started by young people. But they're stifling that, stifling the ability to get further education, stifling the ability to dream. And that's exactly what that campaign, the If I Was President campaign, was about. You know, as young people, or as people in general, we need to be able to imagine ourselves in positions of power. And I'm taking this from Vanessa Tahaya. Has anyone heard of Vanessa Tahaya? Yeah? An incredible young Eritrean woman who's doing a lot of work to raise awareness, especially about the incommunicado detentions. She's the founder of One Day Seoul. She participated in the same challenge that I did, where I wrote the poem saying If I Was President. And in her speech, she said that we need to be able to imagine ourselves in position of power in order for us to move forward. We need to be able to see a future. If you can't see a future, you lose hope. And that's exactly what's happening. We all need to be able to feel like we could be president if we wanted to, in order to invest in making the changes. And that's what this campaign is about. The other person I'd like to tell you about is Siham Ali Abdul. Some of you know about her? Yep. Yeah? So, Siham, for those of you who don't know, was 15 years old when she was in prison. She's the daughter of Ali Abdul, who was working for the government. And when he left, she was caught while she was trying to leave on the border. She has an American passport. And she's been detained now for the past, 7 years. So when she was 15, she just had her 22nd birthday last month in April 3rd. And Eritreans around the world collectively were saying happy birthday, running events, and the online campaign also started, where people were hashtagging happy birthday Siham, to raise awareness about her, to bring international attention to her, as just one of the many young people that are also affected by the unjust laws and the human rights abuses in Eritrea. We've seen several generations now destroyed in Eritrea, whether it was because of the war in '98, and then now because of the ongoing indefinite national service. So what kind of role can we play as young people in the diaspora? That's what I want to talk about now. We have a unique position here. We have access to free speech. We also have a freedom that those before us may not have had, whether it's because we're in a different culture, because there are different norms, or because we have access to more education, because we're not being forced to go to wars or to flee or to take care of our families. We have the privilege of living in this society where individualism is encouraged to a degree, and it's valued rather than shunned. We value people that speak out, and that speak out when something's wrong. And you see, members of the youth community, they're not kids anymore. They're people like myself. We're adults now, and we have adult contributions to make, although we still are youth. And it needs to be recognized as being an adult contribution when we come into these places, when we have these conversations. So what are some of the things that hold our young people back? Because I think many people have mentioned so far that we don't have much youth representation. I mean, we look here today and there's a handful of people that might identify as being young. So I did have a chat to a lot of people, and most of the work that I do is with youth. And I wanted to understand some of the reasons that we don't participate more. So the first is fear. And the fear is a fear of saying or doing something wrong, the fear of being judged, the fear of being the reason for division in our communities, and the fear for our families and for the communities back home. I want to address some of these. I want to talk about first the one about the fear of being the division within the community, because that's something that I faced a lot of the time. I was really scared to speak out because, as in most cities you might experience that there are several different, or at least 2 different Eritrean communities, and you're trying to navigate them. You want to be friends with everybody because you're going to meet them at the mosque or at church or somewhere, but there's also that feeling of, if this is unjust, I can't be here, I can't support it, right? Well, what I'd like to say to that is that unity without justice is not sustainable. And therefore aspiring to have a community that's united because some people are unable to speak, because some people are afraid of being spied on, because some people are afraid of having their family back home hurt. That's not a unity that you want to preserve. There are other ways to working toward unity through justice, and that's something that we need to talk about. Because peace without justice is riddled with oppression, and it's simply a conflict waiting to happen. And all of our decisions are political. When we decide we don't want to be political, we're actually being political. We're making a political decision. And that's something we need to face. We have to address that. If we decide to stay silent, that's also a political decision. The second one is about the fear of being judged, the fear of doing something wrong. And for that one, I'd like to say that we need more compassion in our communities. When someone makes a mistake, especially young people, we need to be more understanding and to actually care for them and help them to work out how to make it better. The Uptrend movement has shown that standing together in protest is a form of unity, and that there is support for those of us who do want to speak out and who do want to contribute to the country that we come from. The second thing that holds a lot of young people back is disillusionment, or feeling like there is no difference that can be made, or that nothing can be changed. The disillusionment about our communities, because as we've seen, not just in the Eritrean community, in African communities in general, in any small community within Australia, many projects start and then they disappear. Many communities come together and then a conflict happens. It might be personal, but it breaks apart. And I think that makes a lot of young people scared to get involved in something, because is it even going to work? We're going to have too many conflicts, whether it's between old and young, whether it's between religion, whether it's between tribes. And that's something that has really turned a lot of people away. And what I have to say to that is that it's our responsibility to work out how we can change things. Not to be afraid by what's already happened and what we've seen, but to think about how we can make it better. Strive together through unity. As it was mentioned, especially in Dr. Burhan's speech, about how we need to be united and to grow together, right? We need to have that reconciliation, exactly. We need to have that reconciliation from the beginning, because the road to peace, because reconciliation and peace is not an end goal. It is the road that we walk on. And that's exactly what we need to have. And that's why this movement right here, seeing people from all different parts of the community together, is so empowering, because this is what we need. It's not about pretending that we don't have differences. That's not what we want. We don't want to make everybody exactly the same. What we need is to let everybody identify exactly how they want, and to allow for that, to accept that, and to move forward. And so that's what I say when it comes to that fear. So this gathering here today has been made up of weeks of conversations I've been privileged to sit in, and to see that exact kind of unity, that democracy that we want to see in the country, that was used when bringing everybody together for this meeting. And that's something that we're going to be taking back to all of the young people who couldn't be here today. Stop comparing whether it's your kids or somebody that you see who's not doing so well with somebody who is doing well. I can't tell you how much the encouragement that I've received from the community has helped me to grow and to be better. But there's also a fear when you say things like, needing more manals. And this is not talking bad about it, I really appreciate it. But that's the thing, we don't. We need more people to be who they are and to contribute what they want, right? And the more that we compare, the more difficult that we make it for young people to be able to join the movement at their own capacity. We need to make them look inside themselves, not try to be like somebody else, but work out who they are and what they want to do. And that's how we're going to make a difference, and that's how we're going to get youth engaged. So to tell you about that, I'd like to finish off by talking about what we're trying to do with young people. So myself and Huyam, who's here from Brisbane, who some of you may know, and if you don't, it would be great if you do know her, because she's also an incredible young woman who's doing a lot of good work. We're working with a few other young people around the country to start off conversations just amongst the youth and to reach them in the way that we think we might be able to. So we already have meetings set up in some places, including in in Melbourne and in Adelaide. And I'm talking to some people in Perth who I'm going to be meeting with next week. And we want to have these in every city. And they're not going to be forced to be a part of an organisation just because we don't want to limit it, right? We want people to be able to express in whichever the way they want, but we want there to be a network of people who are doing things. So we're across what everybody's doing in every state, but we're not telling them what to do. So if you do know young people that do want to jump on board with something like that, please let us know, direct them to us, because we want to support them. And that's all we want to provide, is support for other young people to be able to start acting and to start moving. And on top of that, I'd also like to let you know that there are already movements around the world that are run by young people that we're connecting with as well. And the one example that I told you about on social media is just one example. But there are many that have been working around the place. And they're on platforms like Instagram that many of you may not be on, but they're happening. And we feel so empowered. I know I do. That there's momentum now. And there's more young people that have been messaging me, telling me, I want to get involved because I've been in denial for so long. I've been trying to be at peace with the rest of the community for so long, but I'm just learning. I don't know what's happening now. There was this peace with Ethiopia, but nothing's changed. I want to know what's happening in my country. And young people are hungry for that. And we need to be ready to be able to give them answers, to be able to direct them to places where they can feel empowered and where they can get help if they want to get help, that sounds. But if they want to continue to act and to work on this. So this is all I have to say. And the main thing is that have faith in the youth, because we're there and it is our time and our generation will speak up. And there are more of us, so many of us. And it's just about finding each other and finding the strength and knowing that we have everybody here behind us who's going to support us and that's where our power comes from.